Alright, let's talk about three more new movies, or semi-new movies. And we're gonna start with, like, really, really fun, and then we're just gonna kind of get progressively less fun as we go between these three, I guess. That's how it's gonna work. So, let's start with Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Which I know when people heard about another Dungeons and Dragons movie, people immediately went back to the year 2000, I think, with, like, Jeremy Irons and Justin Whalen and Marlon Wayans and stuff like that, and they had bad memories of it, I guess. But to say the least. Um, as far as I go, as far as the whole Dungeons and Dragons thing, I've never really. I think a friend tried to show me how to play it once, but it seems quite complicated, and there's actually a lot of like creativity involved and like sort of hands-on thinking. It feels like I don't know if I'd be wrong to say it feels like there's kind of a lot of improvisation involved. So it sounds awesome if you know what you're doing. But I think it always kind of seemed a bit too, I don't know that I have the abilities to be able to like partake in that effectively. So it's always just been something I've kind of heard about from a distance that I don't really have any knowledge of whatsoever. So going into that's how I went into this was I'm just gonna take this as any other adventure movie, and there might be stuff that goes over my head, but if I'm lucky, maybe I won't notice, and then I'll still be able to have the experience everybody else seems to be having because it got really positive reactions from critics and everybody, and it was but at the same time you would think that sort of hype would be dangerous and it being overhyped, but since I was so at a distance with the movie anyway, I didn't really take into account how well liked it was. So when I saw it, it was just, just here's another movie. So that must have helped a lot because it's one of those things also to where you're like, after a while, could it really be that good, or is it just kind of a you have to kind of be in the know kind of thing? No, it's really, really good. Apparently from any perspective, which is fantastic. And it's worth noting, first off, that it's John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein who did, like, Game Night and stuff like that. And guys we'll talk about later this year also in the fall. And they're really showing what they're capable of now. It feels like they're just, like, really honing their craft as both writers and directors and finding all this creativity and taking these, pre-existing things and creating things that feel new and fresh, or also just doing things out of left field like Game Night or something like that. And they're becoming really, really exciting to watch and see as their careers go and what else they're going to put out. Because, I said, this especially shows that because they've written blockbuster stuff like, the Spider-Man movies and stuff like that, or Homecoming specifically. But to see them direct something that feels this big also on top of writing it feels like they're sort of the stepping stones are getting better and better as they go. So when it starts off, the tone becomes apparent pretty quickly, which was always going to be important for the way they're telling this story. Where this movie is basically, you could very easily put comedy as one of the main genres of this movie. And it's not one of those cases where it's like a blockbuster, adventure movie that just happens to have a lot of comedy in it or a lot of comedy relief in it. It's basically straight up at least half a comedy, if not more. And I feel like just doing that like right up front, and like I said, not feeling like it's just comedy relief, but feeling like it's part of the movie's personality is that it's part comedy, plays a really big part in how successful it is as far as doing what they want it to do. And conveying what they wanted to convey. Starting off with this introduction to this monster character that's like a prisoner, and we're building up like he's going to be this big threatening character, when all he is just the introduction to Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. That's the only purpose he serves. And right away, just like right then and there, you get an idea of what the tone is, and then you see this sort of, pardon meeting or whatever it is. And the idea that Chris Pine has a tragic backstory, I was really curious how this was going down at the start. 'Cause the first time I saw it, I've seen it more than once now. which I'm not ashamed to say at all. But the thing here is we get his tragic backstory, and even that, after a while, is treated comedically. Like, within this, in the same scene we're getting his tragic backstory, we have comedic moments with it, where, like, he starts the story over, and they say, oh, he's gone too far back, he needs to get back where he was, or whatever. And there's a lot of comedy in this scene while he's giving his tragic backstory, which made me think he felt very much like a bullshitter kind of character, so it was a minute before I realized the story he was telling actually was his tragic backstory. I kind of thought he was making it up the first time. And so, in retrospect, where it's like, oh man, that was a lot of comedy surrounding this tragic backstory, but that in no way, not only does that actually show the balance they were able to find tonally and how they make both those things work, but also in retrospect, it's interesting because they really do take it quite seriously. Like, there is an actual emotional impact throughout this movie regarding this backstory and how more is revealed about it also. And another thing that's revealed is a character here played by Hugh Grant, who starts off as an ally and then ultimately becomes who appears to be the sort of main villain, but it actually feels like it could be seen as a cliche to have the villain that seems like the main villain, but he's actually just a pawn for like darker forces. But once again, the fact that they play that up so early, and it's basically, we know these things, there's just enough to where it's revealed that he started off as an ally and now he's a villain, is an arc all its own that it does in like the first 2 minutes. And then the way it reveals that he's just kind of a pawn, but he's still got his own plans going on while all this other stuff is going on. It sounds a lot more complicated than it is because the movie has such a steady flow to it, and the way it sort of presents all of its information is so just sort of organic and smooth as it goes, while it never loses its way of being, like, you know, adventurous and thrilling and extremely funny while all this is going on. And that's, yeah, just right away there's so many impressive things about this. And the way, like I said, coming into this, where it comes from, where it has, like, you know, I guess you could call the game source material. I don't know exactly how far that term stretches, but yeah, so to have probably many audience members come into this feeling like at a distance from it, like they feel like they're not going to get it, and to get this swept up in it right away despite everything that's happening is really impressive and really satisfying also. And I especially love the presence of Hugh Grant here because I feel like maybe we're dealing with a different kind of Hugh Grant than, say, 15 years ago. Like, I feel like everything Cloud Atlas and forward has been a Hugh Grant that's new to what he was back then, like in his romantic comedy days or in his, you know, like beating up paparazzi days or whatever. Where the old Hugh Grant feels like this is the kind of movie that he probably would have taken with his nose in the air and just kind of looking for his paycheck. But you can tell that Hugh Grant's at a place in his career now where this is the stuff that he seems to want to do. Because he seems to have so much fun with it. Like, when you look at, like, you know, Paddington or The Gentleman or something like that, he's just in this really fun place now. To kind of see an actor of his stature, and he comes into this movie making it seem like this is absolutely the kind of... he would not rather be anywhere else than when he was on the set of this movie, is what you feel like when you're watching him. And that comes through also. But to go back to Pine and Rodriguez also... another big strength to this movie, a huge strength to this movie that's throughout it, is their relationship also. Because you might think it's this sort of generic love story kind of thing, which the movie would still be good if that was there, but the movie is significantly better because of how this relationship actually works. Where it's like a brother and sister kind of thing, and it's platonic throughout, and they never even really hint at anything romantic. Like, it's not even like they fake the audience out to make us think it's going to go one direction and it goes another. No, once again, like everything else, they just establish everything right away and say, this is pretty much what it is. And that's... yeah, it feels like there's so... not a lot of bullshit in this movie. Like, when you always have... even when movies are good, they'll have a lot of stuff where it's like, oh, you're just... doing that because it's, you know, script writing rules or something, or it's like, oh, that part's kind of lazy, but at least you got this other stuff working. This movie never seems to be working against itself, It's like you feel like a lot of movies do, or like fighting through something, or like fighting through cliches. This movie's just so smoothly its own thing. It feels, the word refreshing just keeps coming to mind when I think about this movie, and how it feels as, you know, people who have been watching, anybody who saw this, who's seen a bunch of blockbusters lately and over the past several years, there's probably a lot of shit you're tired of seeing, and so this is like the perfect antidote to that. It's great. And then we have Sophia Lillis come in, who, so we've been waiting to break out in this really big way after she blew everybody away in the first It movie, and it's like, this is like an extremely good actress for her age, and then seeing her go into something like this, where I don't know how much I can say about her performance itself, but the character is great, especially being this sort of shapeshifter character, and she has this particular scene in the movie, this chase scene in the middle, and I've talked a lot about how I don't really care for CGI heavy scenes that make themselves look like one take, when they're obviously, it's mostly CGI, and even what little actual things that are here in front of the camera are stitched together to make it look that way. The Extraction movies come to mind, Atomic Blonde comes to mind. Movies like Extraction and Atomic Blonde kind of ruined the one-take action scene. So, to embrace it here, what's really great about it is, first off, it's one of those cases where you only kind of realize about halfway through the scene that they're doing this sort of one-take look about it. But what's going on in the way she's constantly shape-shifting, whether it be back to herself or back to another animal or whatever, there's a fluidity that this chase scene needs that could probably only be had through that, having that look where it looks like it's one shot, and the fact that it covers so much ground also, is really, that's where you can tell they're making it as an actual legit creative choice, and not just saying, oh, let's see how long we can make this go, and because it's so easy to get people really excited about something that looks like one shot when it clearly isn't. But like I said, it felt like it served a purpose here, and it wasn't just for the sake of it. And it makes the scene so much better. And that's what that's for. That's why you do that stuff, not just to see how much you can cram into it just because. Extraction, Atomic Blonde, fuck you both. And there's also, a lot of other characters here, like Regé-Jean Page from Bridgerton has a great part here where he's basically, like I said, I don't really have any knowledge of the game whatsoever, but watching Regé-Jean Page's character, I could tell he's something like he's very much like a character out of a game intentionally, kind of like Rhys Darby in the Jumanji movies. Something like that, which is it feels like a great it feels like a great joke that I can laugh at, but I know I don't completely get it, but I get just enough of what I think it is that it's still funny. So that's really great. Justice Smith, I think his name is, the kid from Detective Pikachu, is also here. He gets his own great arc also, an arc that actually hit me more the second time around. Even though I knew it was coming, but it was like, it just felt like there's a surprising depth here that may possibly, because there's so much going on, they have a great way of balancing everything, but there actually are depths that may kind of go under the radar until you see it again, because, like I said, there's so much adventure and comedy going on. But that's the thing, it's just there's so much to take in. To where it's, like I said, it's not like it's, beaten down by the adventure and the comedy and all that. It's just like, there's just a lot here to take in a really good way. So, I like the way that was handled. And I love how there were times where I actually felt surprised. In ways that I feel like are missing from a lot of movies now. Like, there's a character in this named Marleman, and when he is introduced and he has a scene, traditionally there'd be one thing that was surprising about Marleman, and that's who plays him. But what really excited me was the fact that who plays him is kind of the least surprising thing about Marvel. And he only has one scene, but it's like when he's introduced, like his appearance, and as the scene progresses, his personality continued to surprise me, and it's like, and it was just like, the cherry on top that who plays him is also a surprise. So, and that's a thing too. Is there's so many like cameos that get spoiled throughout. Like there's people that have cameos that about like months in advance now, and I really miss watching movies and somebody popping up and I'm genuinely surprised that they're in it because I had no idea they were coming. And this was one of those. I loved having that feeling again, where it's like, holy shit, I had no idea. I had no idea to expect that person at all. So that's great, also. And yeah, and also that's just also really funny, also because of that. Not just is it great because it's surprising, but the surprises are so funny. But there's also scenes here that where I'm not somebody that like laughs loudly. I feel like my laugh is kind of suppressed, but I was laughing loudly at this scene in a cemetery. That's so perfectly executed from a comedic standpoint, and once again, it's progressing the story. It's progressing the plot as it goes. This is like, we have to get through this scene in order to get to the next thing. But I mean, not only is it like fall out of your fucking chair funny, this scene in the cemetery, but the movie feels like it's constantly that, where it's like, whether it be, the Sophia Lillis chase, or the scene in the cemetery, or, the scene with, like, the walking brain creatures, or even the character interactions. It feels like, Marleman, it feels like every single scene of this movie is memorable and funny or great for a reason, where it's like, when you're watching a movie that you've seen before, and there's like that one scene that stands out, and you're watching it and you're like, oh man, I can't wait to get to that scene. I can't wait to see that scene again. This movie is full of those, where it's like, one scene happens, and you're like, starts, and you're like, oh man, I love this scene. And then the next scene comes, and you're like, oh man, I love this scene too. And that's like the whole movie, basically. And I just feel like not many movies feel that way anymore. There's always like some bullshit filler or something like that, where like everything's fucking almost 3 hours now. This one breaks 2 hours, I think, but taking out credits, not by much. It might even fall a little under 2 hours if you take out credits, but everything feels like it's here for a purpose, and everything feels like it hits. Like, every scene feels like a hit. Like, there's even a scene where they're, it's... I'm not sure how you describe it. It's one of those surrounded by lava scenes, and eventually a dragon is going to come into this scene. And yeah, this scene looks a little, green screeny, I guess you could say, compared to everything else, because the effects are really good. That's a plus, too, is nothing here looks cheap or half-ass, as far as effects go. But as far as, like, this dragon scene looking very green screeny, there are a couple of things there. Number one, I have heard the theory that this is basically like we're basically watching, like, humans playing Dungeons and Dragons, and we're just seeing the story. I have seen that theory, and so it's like, so if there's like a fake background or something like that, or something feels almost like soundstagey or something, it kind of makes sense if you run with that theory, to where what we're looking at isn't completely real. So you could take that route, but honestly, even if you're taking it at the movie completely at face value, and there's a scene that looks sort of green screeny, if a movie is shit, that's gonna really stand out, and it's like, because there's nothing else to draw your attention away from that. An effect that may not look perfect, but because fun and creativity always wins out in this movie, it just doesn't really matter. And anyway, it's also drowned out by this effect of the dragon, which is great, because, once again, could have just been a normal dragon. It could have just been, a dragon scene that we've seen a million times before. But this is an unconventional dragon, I guess you could call him. And that's what it feels like, where it's like every time you feel like you're gonna do something that's something we've seen a million times before, just tweak it just a little bit at least, and make it slightly different, and that could change everything. And that's what John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein seemed to understand when they were making this. Was, we can make this totally and completely cliche, we can make all the beats, just everybody knows this, and it's just another one of those movies. Because that's the thing, too, I should have started with this. I'm really not even into the fantasy genre at all. Like, I can name maybe 2 or 3 movies with dragons in them that I like. There's like, this is not even my thing at all. Like, take Dungeons and Dragons itself out of the equation. This genre is something that I typically don't really care that much about. But yeah, I'm just totally into this, and I think it helps a lot that they just kept making these little changes, whether it be, completely taking expectations to another direction, or just making one thing off or new or fresh in some different way. It all, just everything is working to make sure that this movie is just non-stop. And doing exactly what it needs to do in exactly the right way. And yeah, and I love it. And to top that off, the climax is pretty cool too. We get kind of 2 climaxes, and they're both good. Because this is another one of those kind of movies where you get to, like, the climax, and by then you're basically tired of action. And it's a lot of CGI, and you're just like, alright, we know how this is going to wrap up, so we just kind of have to wait for the action to happen so we can get to the conclusion. But it doesn't feel like that. Like, it stays with, feeling big and adventurous and doing new things throughout the climax. And it's, yeah, and it's a lot of fun, and that's great. And I love, a really good climax. Like, when Top Gun Maverick came out last year, I was, like, floored to see an action climax that I was actually felt invested in, because it just felt like so long ago since I felt that way, because climaxes anymore are just noise and bodies colliding and everything's a mess and it doesn't matter and we know the outcome. But here, and talking about the outcome after the climax, where I talked about there being a big emotional payoff that actually really works, and it's like, you get the sense of where this is going. It kind of, like, as soon as we reach a certain point in the climax, or after the climax or whatever, it's abundantly clear what is going to happen here. But because of the way they play it, because of how the characters have been built up, and the way we've seen them throughout their history, them in the present, and at this current stage, regardless of you knowing what's going to happen and how this is going to play out, it's still a very emotional moment. Surprisingly emotional. I could not believe how I felt watching this scene. And that's, yeah, it almost seems easy. Like, it's like, making a movie like this, as good as it is, cannot have been easy. But it's like, when you look at the bad movies, or the movies that are so formulaic and so do not give a shit about being fresh or new, it's like, this movie makes it look easy. Where it's like, why aren't movies just doing this? Like, why is it so hard to give us an emotional connection and let us have fun and laugh all at the same time? You can do it. It's possible. This movie is proof that it's possible. Why is it so fucking hard? I don't know. But, so yeah, very happy with that. And the couple of times I've seen it won't be the only times, I'm sure. So, yes, I love all that. A really great villain, too. Not Hugh Grant, but the other villain. Very genuinely... There's some genuinely startling moments here, also. I love... We were just recently talking about... Was when we were talking about Puss in Boots, probably, where it was like, where did all of the scary villains go? As far as movies that, like, aren't, R-rated or, like, completely serious. That's... Yeah. So it's nice to kind of see a resurgence there as well. So, it's all downhill from here. So let's go to Shazam 2. Shazam Fury of the Gods. Let me just say, I've been saying that I've been superheroed out for like the last year or so. But I went ahead and went back to the first Shazam before I saw this one, and I really liked the first Shazam when it first came out. And it turns out that I still do. The first Shazam is really good. Um, so, as far as this goes, obviously it came out. It apparently didn't do well box office wise at all. And we're at like this shift in DC now, where it's like some stuff is basically a lot of stuff is gonna be dead ends, and James Gunn's kind of, you know, doing what he's doing, and we're kind of going that direction. I lost track, so I don't. Even if I hadn't lost track, I don't think I would have felt involved in Shazam 2 anyway. Um, but I had heard, bad things about it, and while it wasn't, I think I knew where to put the bar, so it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. But obviously, this is not great. I will say though that it was a weird feeling starting. It felt like a bad omen when I started watching it, because I don't know how many people saw this. The I-95 thing in Philadelphia, where that like overpass collapsed. Um, that happened the same day that was in the news the same day I saw this. It was that day. So it was a little bizarre when I start this movie with that on the news, and one of the first lines is, "It's a great day in Philadelphia," or something like that. And then the first scene is a bridge collapse in Philadelphia. So right away this movie felt cursed. So there's that. And we have the scene where they save the day with Bonnie Tyler's Holding Out for a Hero playing, which shows you where this movie is sort of feeling of freshness and originality is already coming from. So I don't know how many movies that song's been in at this point, but it's probably too many. So then there were just things here and there that were already just throwing me off. And watching the first one right before it probably didn't do this movie any favors at all. But one thing that kind of caught my attention was the kids grew up really fast. I know the first movie came out in 2019, so it has been enough time that, yeah, there's a lot of growth spurts happening here. But it was weird that for some reason, and I don't remember this being acknowledged, and I don't know if I've heard anything about why it would be, but the fact that the whole idea is when they Shazam themselves, they turn into heroes. And they're different actors. So, like, when the youngest girl does it, she's Megan Good, and when Jack Dylan Grazer does it, he's Adam Brody. Mary, in the first movie, turned into Michelle Borth. In this one, it's just her. She's just the same actress, and she's the only one like that. I don't know. But it's just, like I said, it's just these clues to how much this movie cared about itself, let alone what we're supposed to feel about it. So, like I said, just these little clues that are like, you know what? I think we're giving up. I don't think, like, we're coming to a dead stop. The whole James Gunn thing is gonna happen. Let's just, I mean, I don't know if this was, like, made before the James Gunn stuff went down, because obviously stuff happens long before we actually hear about it. So I don't know where this was in the timeline, but I don't know. But you can sense that it's almost like they knew they were reaching a dead end, and this was going to come out anyway, so it didn't matter what happened in this, honestly. That's what it feels like. They added Rachel Zegler, who's like a love interest to Freddy. And her character has other sides to her, I guess. Rachel Zegler, who I thought was awful in West Side Story, and I think is awful here. There's a scene between them at the start where it's very forced awkwardness that just does not feel natural in any way whatsoever. She like touches his chest in this weird way. I don't know, but even when things about her character are revealed early, it doesn't really change the fact of what this scene was going for at the end of the day, when we get to the sort of character arc for her and Freddy together. No, it doesn't mean anything, like apparently the rest of this movie. There are also things where I was just kind of rewriting the movie in my head, which is something you don't want your audience doing. So it was like, we had the comeuppance to the bullies in the first movie, where he picked up the truck and he dropped it. And I feel like we just kind of never saw them again. And then obviously, Freddy stuck it to everybody by Shazam showing up to lunch, and then ultimately Superman. Um, for some reason, in this, the bullies haven't changed. They're just literally the same characters. I don't really know what the purpose of that is, except for just more of the same. Because I feel like it would have been... Not only would it have been just better and cutting out bullshit, but you could have done something really funny with completely changing the boys' personalities after everything that happened in the first movie. Where they're like make them like super nice now and like super friendly and just like have a complete and total makeover of these characters. But no, they're the same characters for some reason. There's not we have this arc already. I don't know what else can be gained from them still being bullies, but they don't even matter. So we can just move on, I guess. There are some things here that I don't mind. Though it does feel like it's telling that the best character in the movie is a floating pen. It seems like right out of a Pixar short or something. So there's that. He does lead to a joke that's like, because you say it and then the pen writes it, and that kind of turns into like, there's been a few things out there where we do like talk to text jokes where it's like you say too much and it gets written down and sent. There's an episode in the third season of Barry, like the best episode of Barry, has a joke like that, a talk to text joke. So we've seen that before and done significantly better. Our villains are Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu, who sometimes feel like they're trying and sometimes are here for the money. They're definitely not, they're a far cry from what Hugh Grant was doing in Dungeons and Dragons for sure. But there is one moment here where Lucy Liu's character has a reaction to Gatorade that I thought was really funny. Not Gatorade itself, just the word. That made me laugh. It's just like one quick line. And something I'd normally really be against actually kind of started to work for me as the movie went on. I was mad at it at first, but then it kind of grew on me. And that's the fact that Djimon Hounsou has come back, despite, crumbling. And they bring that up a lot. They bring up throughout the movie that he died when he crumbled like that. And then they say, how are you back? And I don't remember that question ever being answered despite how much it came up. But the thing I would normally hate that grew on me was his character is comedic now. Like an actual comedy relief character. And at the time it started to grow on me was, and it's a stupid joke, but it just, maybe it's Djimon that's funny. Because when he keeps calling Freddy the wrong name, and at one point he calls him Jeff, that was actually just really funny in the moment. And then as it went on, and he becomes like an actual comedic character, I guess it was working. But like I said, I think it's the fact that Djimon's an actor that he's typically like super serious, and usually he's, has like a tragic character. So to see him actually like be funny, it felt refreshing. So it's probably just him rather than the character that's working, but at least it's working. So there's that. I was also surprised by the fact that this movie did not let up on the brutal way bystanders are treated in Shazam movies. I think of that horrific moment in the first movie where the girl touches the door and vaporizes. And the boardroom scene. David F. Sandberg bringing like the horror that he's so good at into these movies. And yeah, this movie also is really brutal to bystanders. Where it's like, even though it might have more of an impact if it was done to the hero characters, it does feel like there's a level of threat here when these bystanders are brutalized, like the museum guide at the beginning, or Diedrich Bader has a bad fate, despite being an otherwise seemingly nice character. The climax, people are clearly not getting out of it alive. So there's something there that I like that they kind of kept. But, like I said, as it goes on, you start to see more of a lack of care. I know David S. Sandberg, I think he said that he's done with superhero movies after this, and I think that's for the better. Like, he handled the first movie really well, but he is so good at horror. And even maybe seeing him branch out into other things also. He will be a very exciting filmmaker, kind of leaving superheroes behind, I think. So I feel like that's actually good news. So, but he did what he could while he was here. Because this doesn't feel like, knowing he's a talented director and how good the first movie came out, this movie does not feel like a David F. Sandberg problem. Like, I feel like this can be expunged from his record, I think. Um, because, like I said, it just feels like all behind the scenes stuff where it's like, we're going to reach a dead end here, so we'll just finish this and throw it out. So even when it gets to, like, there's a point in time where there's a reveal that they've caught the villain seemingly, but then, oh, the villain actually wanted to be caught so they can do this. And it's like, oh, how 2012 of you. How, or 2000, there's The Dark Knight, there's Skyfall, there's Star Trek Into Darkness. It was a trend there for a while. And what I was talking about with climaxes in Dungeons and Dragons, where most of them are like really boring and just sort of destructive. Yeah, this is one of those really boring, destructive climaxes that goes on forever and ever and fucking ever. I feel like when the climax started, I think there was like an hour left. It looked like, or what looked like the climax starting. It said there was like an hour left. So there was that, and all that just gets really tiresome. You know what I actually feel like was probably missing from this also? That not that you can do this every time or anything, but I think there was a particular charm to having the first movie have the Christmas setting. To where like it just, there was something about it that just gave it like another charm, and you kind of would just kind of see that in the background. And this just kind of has nothing in the background to give it any sort of life. So that probably didn't help either. And we have cameos that, like I've been saying, are probably too little too late, given everything going on behind the scenes here. So, yeah, so like I was saying, it's not as bad as I was expecting, I guess. I was expecting worse, but it's not great or anything. So, it's not super painful, but you can see it falling apart at the seams and nobody really working to fix it. It's just like let it go. Just let Rome burn. Just David S. Sandberg's playing the fiddle all the way to his next great horror movie and so on. So that's how this movie was pretty much left. So let's end on Peter Pan and Wendy, which is another live action Peter Pan adaptation from Disney. I think it went straight to Disney Plus. I'm losing track of this stuff, but yeah. So I like the new Disney opening for like the 100 years looks nice, and like how we're kind of getting it from a different angle and all that. It's nice. But the thing about this movie is, for starters, we just had another sort of artsy looking Peter Pan movie when Ben Zeitlin did Wendy recently, which honestly I had completely forgot. I've watched it and I talked about it on this channel, but I completely forgot it existed until I was watching this movie and I was like, I feel like, didn't we just have another Wendy? Wendy was like a year or two ago. That's right. And it wasn't great either. So here, though, we have David Lowery, who, one of the things that I've always praised about the Disney remakes is the Jungle Book, obviously, when Favreau did the Jungle Book, and then when David Lowery did Pete's Dragon, because I feel like Pete's Dragon is one of the live-action remakes that a lot of people forget about. You never hear it mentioned, and I think a lot of people just kind of thought it was forgettable, but I remember really liking it, especially since it felt like, you know, they were kind of doing the live-action Disney thing, but you could also actually see Lowry in it, which I found really appealing. And it's like it felt more artful than the other ones do. And that's the thing, too, is when people complain about the consistency of these live-action Disney remakes, the thing everybody says is they're soulless, and they're cash grabs, and they're artless, and they're only doing it to print money and stuff like that. And the interesting thing is, it's like, yeah, and I get it, because, you know, you hire Guy Ritchie, who clearly has, you know, a way of his own, and he does Aladdin, and you don't really see him in Aladdin. It's just there. It's like somebody to say, hey, you're a well-known director, we know you're competent, could you make this thing exactly the way we want it to be made, is what these feel like. And it's like, so we can print money, you can have your paychecks for your smaller movies, and we all win.
But whoever keeps deciding to hire David Lowery for these seems like they want more. Because, like I said, when you look at Pete's Dragon, it doesn't completely stick out when you look at his filmography. Like, you can see him in... I mean, obviously, it's different, but you can see him in there, and there's something very sort of... I don't know, something calmer than a typical live-action Disney remake. And here is the same way, where it's like, you can really see it's a director getting to direct the way he wants to. It just is also clearly Disney's product. But they seemed like they met in the middle. There's definitely enough Lowry in this movie where you can see they at least met in the middle. And like I said, whoever's making that decision, whoever made the decision on Pete's Dragon, and then said, we should do that, we should get him again. And for this, and it's like, somebody in there might have something on the brain besides money a little bit. At least halfway. So, there's hope when you see David Lowery working with Disney. But, yeah, and it's certainly, I feel like, says more visually than, say, not just other live-action Disney remakes, but like, Wendy and stuff like that, the Zeitlin movie. There is something here in the sort of visual storytelling of it. Now, mind you, the visuals may be all this movie has going for it. Like, we will acknowledge the visuals are pretty much the only thing this movie has going for it. But it's something. And for it to be consistent throughout the whole movie, the whole movie to consistently look good, that's at least something. I know we're really putting the bar low for these Disney remakes, but like I said, if I get to look at a David Lowery movie and feel like I'm looking at a David Lowery movie, a part of me is fine. A part of me is perfectly content. And there's the well-shot opening where we see, like, all through the house, and the camera just feels really lively. There's all that, and you can actually get the sense that it's basically fighting off blandness is what it feels like. Like, it doesn't feel excessive. It feels like, it's a director who wants what's on the camera to feel like it's alive. And like I said, have this sort of at least artful feel to it a little bit, as much as Disney will allow. The maximum that Disney will allow. There is something, but when you look at it also, because it might seem like that's not as good when they're outside of the house. Because like I said, the interiors are shot really well. The outside, the first thing we see when we get outside is the flying scenes. And obviously the flying scenes are going to be extremely CGI heavy. I actually didn't mind the flying scenes when we were like, it was almost like a point of view kind of style. It's when the characters are flying kind of in the camera's direction. Like when we're getting a front shot of the flying is when it looks really bad. Really bad. But, like I said, though, the way the shots are, and the way, like, Larry seems to be able to want to put as much in one frame as possible. Like, just these shots that feel so big and massive. Like, there's the moment where Wendy, like, washes ashore after they get to Neverland. And it's just, like, this really massive shot of, like, the waves and all that. And, even when they're, like, running through fields, which look like, typical, David Lowery movies at some point, it feels like, it might feel like, somebody trying to do David Lowery instead of him actually doing it in some of these, but I don't know, I still feel like it works as far as visuals go. Like I said, even if that's all it's got going for it. But like I said, with all of the editing we see a lot also, I love just seeing a director doing a movie by a company like Disney, and the way they typically treat their remakes, and to have these massive shots where just everything's in the frame is very refreshing. Like I said, as far as the story goes, that's another thing. And the thing about it is, I don't really know where to come from with this, because the Peter Pan story has never really done it for me anyway. I grew up on Hook, and I love Hook. I know Hook front to back, and that's putting it mildly. But apart from Hook, I have never really liked another Peter Pan movie. Or any other kind of like the story itself. I feel like the story is boring to me. The animated movie I could never get into. The movie with Jason Isaacs from 2003, I could never get into. In any like Ben Zeitl's adaptation or this one, I just don't think the Peter Pan story is for me. I guess like Hook did it, and that's the thing too is because my mind is programmed for this story to be Hook, the Spielberg movie. Every actual Peter Pan story to me feels like it's Hook in reverse, where instead of Tinkerbell coming to get Peter to take him back to Neverland, it's like it almost like throws me off every time it's Peter coming through the window to take Wendy and everybody. But even so, I don't know. The I just never cared about this story. I just never did anything whatsoever. And this movie continues to prove that point because once we get to a certain point, like once they're off the ship and they're with the Lost Boys and they go into that whole thing, I'm just gone. I just don't care. And that's the way this story has always been. Like I can't even really hold it against the movie. I don't think because it's just been a story in general that I've never cared about. So that's where we are. As far as like another thing I didn't mention about it, the way it was shot was I like when they're on the boat and the interiors are like the interior shots from within the boat where we see like the rocking of it is also something. But this is kind of our segue into Jude Law playing Hook, which was kind of the most exciting thing about this movie, apart from the fact that David Lowery was making it. And while I do think he's a good choice, I feel like his performance as Hook is disappointingly downplayed, I guess you could say. Because, I mean, I usually when you imagine a Hook, you're imagining like somebody. It's a performance that should be eating the movie alive. And I can tell as the story goes on, or as the movie goes on, what they were going for with a more downplayed Hook, because he certainly got his moments of being like full on villain or whatever, but you can get the sense that they were trying to find a more internalized Hook and like see like where he's coming from. The backstory where he was like one of them at one point plays a big part in this, and you can see the start of what could have been interesting for his character. But the emotional impact just isn't quite there, I don't think. And I'm not asking for like when Hugh Jackman played Blackbeard for Joe Wright. I'm not saying like that big, but it would have been nice to feel like Jude Law was having fun, and there were times where that was there, but there were also a lot of times where it was like he was being held back. And like I said, even doing a more internalized Hook and a more subtle Hook, I get it. And I can see pieces of it, but like I said, maybe the movie's too short for that. Because Disney Plus movies are a lot shorter than they let on, because they have credits and then they have a separate set of credits that are like in different languages. So even though it says like an hour 49 on the runtime, the movie ends at an hour 33. So it's so it's pretty short. So maybe if we had more time to delve into Hook like that, it could have been interesting. Maybe it could have been its own movie, rather than doing the Peter Pan and Wendy thing and then focusing on the Lost Boys doing that whole thing. It also kind of feels like Peter Pan isn't in this movie very much. There's a whole point in time where we're supposed to assume he's dead, which he is clearly just killing time. Killing time in this movie that's already relatively short. But it's also a Peter Pan that feels like he can barely swing a sword when you see the choreography of these fight scenes. I don't know. It's like maybe it's the point where Peter Pan's a child, so he can. But Peter Pan is also magic, and I feel like he's supposed to be this character that can swing a sword effortlessly, even despite being a child, because he's beat Hook so many times, supposedly. I don't know. This kid looked like he barely held a sword before they started filming, so I don't know. Wendy had a much better grasp on it when she was doing her one scene. But yeah, I don't know. That's I said the Lowry thing gives me hope, because it's like because I don't even think Pete's Dragon broke 100 million, but it also wasn't one of their mega hits. It certainly wasn't one of their $1 billion hits. So it's interesting that there's somebody at Disney that keeps saying we should get Lowry again for this. I'd like to know who that person is, and I'd like to encourage them. because they do bring something. And like I said, because the only like Disney remakes that really stand out are Favreau's Jungle Book, which was kind of their first foray into this new era of the Disney live action remakes, and Pete's Dragon. Those two were the same year, by the way. I think 2016, so maybe that had something to do with it also. But yeah, and you may be clocking that Mary Poppins Returns poster. That is not a remake. That is a sequel. It's its own thing, and it's amazing. So fuck off. It's not. It's not in this realm. So that's yeah. That's how I feel about this. Like it's I really appreciate it for what it looks like and for them trying to do something fresh by bringing Lowry in, but it's still the same boring ass Peter Pan story, and they didn't really do anything to change that. So that's what it is. So I think we can end this here. The next thing should be, unless something goes wrong, me and my brother talking about The Flash, and then whatever the next set of 3 new releases is that we'll talk about, or fairly new releases, whatever. And whatever else is happening. So until then, I think that's it.